we actually had a number of people reaching out to Claudia asking if we were going to be recording this because they couldn't make it, but they were really interested in what you had to say.
Okay.
So we're going to be recording it so that it can go up onto our website so that all of your wonderful knowledge and your presentation can be shared and be a permanent resource for people.
Okay. So, I mean, I have a few slides, and I can send that to you after. And what I wasn't sure if people, like how many people were going to be joining, if there were any questions that people had sent in. But, you know, I can just do a little bit of an overview and then just open it up if there are any questions.
Okay. I'm not seeing a whole lot of activity here. I have questions, but I mean, I can keep it going for a little while.
Well, we did have a lot of people that said they were interested, but you know, as you know, in the graduate world, people are really busy, but they, you know, having this online will give them a permanent resource that they can go to when they have that opportunity. So we really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Okay. So I'll start out now. For those who may be joining at a later time, my name is Anita DeCiani Brown, and I'm the Career Development Coordinator for SUNY Empire State College. I'm also a two-time alum. I completed my bachelor's degree in 2012 and completed my master's in adult learning in 2015. So I have been working in higher education in the Career Center for almost 29 years. I've been with SUNY Empire a little over 4, and before coming here, I was at RPI in the Career Center there. So that's just a little bit of my background. And so Wales had contacted me a couple months ago and asked me to do this presentation and you know, talk about CVs and resumes and what are the differences, when to use you know, which document, and you know, even to share some resources for people as they're coming up on graduation, and you know, what are good sites to use as far as looking for opportunities. So I'll go over everything and then open it up for any questions that you may have. I'll share this a couple of times, but you know, what I do want to say is hopefully people do receive emails from me. I am a resource here for students, and when you complete your degree, I'm also here for alumni. I offer face-to-face appointments. I travel to our various locations around the state, and I can also do Skype appointments. So I do make accommodations, and we can set up a one-on-one appointment if you're interested. That said, you know, first I'll start out talking about the differences with a CV and using a resume. So for those of you who may have already who haven't developed a CV yet, you know, CVs are used primarily for people that are applying to doctoral programs, and they're used for professional opportunities in academia, in the medical field, in teaching, and in research. You know, there are a couple differences, and I'll kind of switch back and forth. I'm going to talk about CVs right now, but there may be some comparisons of what you have on a CV versus what you have on a resume. So a CV doesn't include the formerly known as objective or summary or a profile. It is very specific, and even in the hierarchy of how the information is listed. Where a resume, you can shift things around based on relevance. CVs can be over 3 pages, or 3 pages or longer, just as long as the information is relevant. And I talk a lot about relevancy on application documents because, you know, there may be some past experiences that you had that doesn't necessarily need to go on either your resume or your CV, but you know, it can, just as long as the information is relevant to what you're applying for. And then the actual physical appearance for a CV, they do recommend that you don't use bullet points. It tends to be presented in more of a narrative form, where resumes, it's recommended that while you can have a little bit of a narrative, that you have bullet points, so it's something that it's easy for people to read and skim through. On the resume side, resumes are used for applying for positions in pretty much everything but, outside of academia, medicine, teaching, and research. And even in applying for some positions in academia, I applied for the position that I have using a resume. I didn't use a CV. So I think that, it really depends on the position. Either one is acceptable, but, I just wanted to point that out. On a resume, I mentioned in the CV part, the formerly known as objective. So if it's been a while since somebody has applied for positions, objectives really aren't used anymore, because the reality is employers, it doesn't matter to an employer what we are looking for as job applicants. What matters is that you take that space and create either a career highlights, a career summary, just general summary profile, whatever you'd like to call it. But, that is something that you take the time to write maybe 3 or 4 sentences that aligns you for the position that you're applying to. And I'll use a quick example. If I was applying for a position in higher education, I would probably highlight the fact that I've worked in higher education for almost 30 years. So, you take the time to develop that content based on positions that you're seeking. A resume should never go over 2 pages, and it really doesn't matter how much experience you've had. If you're using a resume, it should not be anything more than 2 pages. Today, there's a belief that you can just go back 10 years. You can go back longer if there's relevance to positions that you're applying for, but whatever you do, just make sure that it doesn't go over 2 pages. As far as content goes, you want to make sure on a resume that what I call the top third of your resume is sort of the high real estate section. So you want to have information that's up there that's going to catch readers' attention in order for them to continue on in your resume. Statistics show that traditional resume gets about 8 seconds for somebody to scan it and decide whether or not you can go into the, yes, I'm going to actually read this resume, or I don't see anything on the first scan around, and this person is going to go in the no pile.
Wow.
Yeah. And it is, I do keep on checking and like different resources, but that hasn't changed. It's been that way for about 8 or 10 years. Before coming here, the Career Center at RPI, there would be, we used to have 2 big career fairs, and even at definitely a career fair, somebody's just going to skim through it really quickly. They're going to look for words. Their eyes are trained to look for things. If somebody's ahead of a hiring committee, they're looking for specific words. And if they're not seeing it, if they have 400 resumes, they can't read 400 resumes. They're going to scan through things and see who, on a quick scan, best aligns with what they're looking for. I mentioned that, you can have information for the past 10 years as far as experience goes. I tend to recommend using bullet points rather than a narrative content. The reason for that is you tend to start out the bullet points with keywords or action verbs. So it's easier for a reader to kind of scan through that and look for the things that they're trying to find, as opposed to reading something. So people read, or when they skim something, they skim things in a Z format. And so you kind of want to make sure that those keywords are the ones that are going to stand out, and they tend to do that when there's the bullet points. And on a CV, you include references, and on a resume, you don't. There was a time that we used to include resumes available upon request. References available upon request. And the reality is today, references are always a required document. So, if you're applying for positions, most likely the application packet is going to include your cover letter, your resume, and a reference. And they tend to be 3 separate documents. I'm going to go a little bit more into some of the things for CV, just because there are some, there are a little bit more differences in how you develop a CV versus the resume content. So the traditional sections for a CV, you have your identifying information, then you list out your education. You'll then go into if you have any certifications or licenses, you would list those. If there is a validation date for any of the licenses, you can include that as well as the numbers, the license number. Then you would include your dissertation or your thesis. It's suggested that you provide not only the title, but a brief description, the name of your advisor, and the committee names as well. Next, you would list out any awards, honors, fellowships, and scholarships. And it's also recommended that you include a little bit of background, maybe a sentence or two about the honor, in the event that the reader isn't familiar. So I'm going to use the Chancellor's Award as an example. So, if somebody has received the Chancellor's Award, you can list that on your resume and then just put like a 1-sentence description, just so, if I'll say Siena College because it's a local college here, my daughter graduated. So if somebody was applying to Siena and they weren't familiar with the Chancellor's Award is, and they were an awardee, the review committee would understand what that award was about. Then you go into your experience section, and the experience section is a little bit different than on a resume. So it's suggested that you actually break it down if it falls into these different categories, but have like a research experience section, teaching experience section, consulting, practicum, field work, and you break it out that way. Within each of those, you would still do the chronological order with most recent on top. Next, you would include any publications or creative works that you've had. Then going into presentations, so if you had an opportunity to be a speaker at a conference, you would include that there. They look for the name of the conference, the topic which you presented on, and the location and date as well. If you've had academic service, so higher education, there tends to be a lot of committee work. So you would include that, and even if you were participating as part of as a student. So Lynn-Ann, I'm going to use you as an example because you serve on SAC. And you've done that while you've been a student, so that's something that you would certainly include in there as well. And Sally, I know that you have been an officer for the Graduate Student Collaborative, and you would include that as well on there. So it's recommended that you have departmental and university groups, committees, and task force in which you've served on. Then if you are a member of a professional organization, you would include that. I'll put a little plug in about memberships in professional affiliations. If there is a professional organization that you may want to join, now would be the time to do that, because most organizations offer an excellent student rate. The majority of the ones that I know of offer at least half off their annual fee, and some even a little bit more. So that I would highly recommend, if you haven't considered, kind of taking a look at the different organizations that you may be interested in joining, and see what their graduate student rate is. That's really helpful as far as I belong to a couple of different organizations, and it's very good professional development. So it does highlight, some of the upcoming trends. It talks about issues and problems in the field, and it's highly recommended. As well as it's a great opportunity to network with others. Then you would include other professional experiences, whether they're paid or volunteer. So if it didn't fall into, I'll say, like the academic or research area, then you can include it in this section. If you had any types of special training, you would include that in there as well under a separate heading. If you speak other languages, you would include that. And what they do recommend is that you include your level. So if it is conversational, I'll use Italian because I am Italian, and if I would include it, I might say conversational Italian instead of fluent Italian. So they do recommend that if you are bilingual or multilingual, that you include that as well in the level at which you speak. And then finally, on the CV, you do include your references. You list the name, their title, and their contact information. And I always recommend to include both their email address as well as their telephone number. And then the last slide that I had is actually to talk about, where you can go about researching opportunities. And I took it from the perspective of mainly academic types of positions, but I was also going to leave it open for conversation if people had, other opportunities that they were looking to pursue outside of higher education. So I've included the careers at SUNY Link. The Chronicle of Higher Education has a job board. There is the Higher Ed Jobs, academic careers online, which I have found there have been a lot of adjunct positions that have been listed there. And then finally, I included USA Jobs, and that's more on the research end. So if somebody was interested in, working for, I think of national labs, the USA Jobs are all positions within federal government. So I'm going to open it up for any questions, because that's just a really quick overview of what I had been asked to talk about, but then again, just wanted to see if there were questions that you had.
I actually just typed a couple questions so I wouldn't forget them. You mentioned the limit on how much space you use. That's always come up, because especially when you get up with a lot of experience, you're always kind of juggling that. I love that you pointed out that 10-year job experience is a good gauge. And when you were mentioning the one page, now you're talking about just the cover letter, or are you talking about all the bullet points and everything together?
No, actually, a two-page resume is the limit. I don't, and if I said one page, I apologize, but 2 pages for a resume. For CV, it can be over 3 pages. I mean, I have seen, more experienced individuals that have had a lot of publications. They have done speaking at conferences. So I've seen like even 5-page CVs. But for a resume, it shouldn't go over 2 pages. And there's ways that, and I do work with people on their resume. So there's ways that you can consolidate information. So you are really highlighting a lot of your experience, but then just not repeating things, each time. So I'm going to use as an example, if somebody has had supervisory experience. If they've had supervisory experience in maybe 4 positions, the area that is the summary section, you could say it like what I recommend in that section is, supervisory experience, managing up to X number of employees. So you kind of cover everything there and not have to list it out for every single position.
The only other question I have, and then I'm going to be quiet for a while, is you mentioned keywords, and I've always worried about that because with technology, I'm always curious about like one position with a global company, they run the resumes through a computer program.
Yep.
And they pick out those keywords, and it's almost like your resume doesn't even get to see eyes until. So do you have recommendations of how you would try to know what keywords to use for the position you're applying for?
So applying for a job today is, compared to 10 years ago, is a lot more time consuming. What I recommend is, it sounds like a long exercise, but it's actually pretty simple. I have used an Excel spreadsheet, and I've taken the job description and I've put everything that somebody is looking for in the Excel spreadsheet. And then what I've done is I've gone and I've looked across and said, okay, they're looking for somebody that supervised people. So here's where I did this. They're looking for leadership. Well, here's examples of my leadership. And so I would plug things in there and really try to determine what is the most important things. And then I'm not right. I would never recommend writing a resume to the job description, but you have to make sure that you're using the right words. So, if they were looking for, somebody that is good in communication, has good communication skills, and you don't use the word communicate or communication on your resume, it's not going to get picked up. That's your resume when it goes through an applicant tracking system actually receives a score. You just need to make sure that whatever the verbiage that they are using, that you are reflecting that in the experience that you have. I'm trying to think of other examples. But I guess that my best advice is to actually take the job description and do the exercise that I explained, and then make sure, and look, is on my resume, am I using the right words? If they're looking for a program manager, if they're looking for somebody that is, a team player, well, a team player, you might also want to make sure that you're using the word collaborate on your resume, and within the organization. So you really try to develop your resume and a cover letter to address what they're looking for. The resume, you may have a couple different versions of your resume. The summary section could change, and I always use this example. So if somebody was applying for a position at SUNY Empire for 3 different positions, the summary section could very well change for each one. The cover letter is always going to be different because the cover letter needs to be not a form letter. Years ago, you could say things like, as you can see from my enclosed resume, I have this, I have this, I have this experience. What you should be doing today is looking at what the job is that they're seeking for in the candidate, and trying to tell your story as to why they should speak to you. Give them a firm understanding that the mission of the organization, and then maybe there is when I said a story, there might be something in your previous experience that you can tell a little bit of a story, within a paragraph, as to how you're a connection for what they're looking for.
Okay, so please feel free to jump in with any other questions.
I wish I'd taken shorthand in high school.
Well, it's Eileen. Can I ask a question? I'm not actively seeking a job right now, but one of the things, a lot of our students, as was I when I went looking for work, are older students. We're not coming out, right out of college. We have a lot of background and experience, which can be a plus and can be a minus. And to the extent of dates going in, you don't want to look, I'll take me, you don't want to look like a dinosaur applying for a job. But again, you want to show, like I worked for IBM for 10 years. That was meaningful, but that was in the 1980s. So I don't necessarily want to have the date show up. Is there any truth in reporting, or what do you suggest? Do you put in all the dates of your different jobs, or what would you do if you're not sure whether you're going to be received well for whatever age you're at?
Yeah, and a lot of our students have come to me with that concern, and for me to say that ageism doesn't happen, I can't, because I know that it does. But at the same time, I also know that organizations today are a lot more careful on who they're selecting, because years ago, somebody might have graduated from college at 22 or 23 years old, gone to work somewhere, and I'll use IBM as an example, because they might have gone to IBM and worked until they retired. Well, that's not the workforce of today anymore, and that's certainly not the workforce of even the traditional college-age student. They do have multiple positions. So what I do recommend is you look at relevant experiences that you have had. I had mentioned that you can put 10 years experience on your resume. There are some people that look to transition in a career. There are others that are just looking for a new opportunity. And I hate saying it this way, but what I would do is I would actually sit down with somebody and kind of go over, what should you be highlighting on your resume to, align yourself with the position that you're applying for. It's not uncommon to just include 10 or 15 years experience, again, on the resume. A job application, there's very few organizations today that have you fill out a job application when you're applying for the job. It normally happens once the interview process starts. So there would be the discrepancy of what you have had on, why isn't what you have on your resume matching up with what you have on the job application. And, as far as conducting the job search, one thing that is said is that today's job opportunities, about 80% of them come from some form of networking. So, it's not just submitting your resume. It's trying to get people to know who you are and what value you can bring to their organization before you even apply for a job. I don't know if that has answered your question. If not, please let me know, and I can try to share some additional information. But as far as students and alumni go, when I talked about the exercise with the job description and breaking it down, the one-on-one appointments that I have with people, I really try to find out, what are you looking for, and try to help develop your resume, your cover letter, your whole application, and your job search to be able to help you achieve your goals. I don't write resumes, but I do go over them, and I just ask somebody to have at least something written so we can go over it. And again, just trying to develop the content so it best aligns with what you're looking for.
I believe Angel had a question. Angel, you can unmute and jump right in.
And Angel, sometimes you have to bring your mouse over the bottom of the screen to see all the options. So I don't know if you can see how to unmute, but you bring your mouse down to the bottom of the Zoom application, you should be able to see a mic that you can mute and unmute.
There you go.
Okay. I really wasn't asking a question. I'm trying to learn the icon, so forgive me. So I'm pressing a couple of things and trying to figure it out. At this moment, I really don't have a question, but just give me some time.
Okay. The amazing thing, Angel, I'm so grateful you did that, because I didn't know we had those icons. So now what I need to do is I need to go research Zoom and find out how you did that.
But it's very interesting what we're talking about, because I have been sending out my resume and I have not gotten much feedback. So I'm not sure who spoke before, but mentioned about the 10 years. Should you put that on the resume or not? You don't want to kind of give out the age and everything. But does the employer look at it as if maybe you're holding something back? Are they able to see that as if maybe is this a younger person or older person?
I'm going to go back to talking about relevance on the resume. The information that that come forward about being able to include 10 years on your resume, some of that has actually come from employers. They've said there are certain things. We live in a technological world, so they're looking at what are experiences that you've had in the past 10 years, because that is career-wise who you are right now. It's not to say that you're not capable of other things, but that the recommendation actually has come out of conversations with employers.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to mute myself back. So, thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is Marlia.
Marlia?
I have a quick question. So I have a lot of relevant work experience 10 years ago, and then I had lost my job due to getting divorced, and so I took a job at Home Depot for like 6 months until I could get another job. So when I do my resume, it looks like I have like 1 year gap of employment if I left out the Home Depot. I mean, everybody keeps saying to me, well, don't put the Home Depot on there because it's like less than what you're going for. And I feel like it looks like a gap in employment.
So I tend to recommend, you know, you can have your experience section and then you can have other experience. And you can include that in there because you're right, it is experience. And I forgot, are you currently, are you still a student?
I'm a grad student, but I took the semester off.
Okay. So what I recommend is that you make sure that your education section is on top, because that is when an employer is looking at what timeline somebody has, if they see the education section on there, that is what you are also, you're currently still enrolled in school. So that is acceptable to have that there because that's what you are focusing on. And there are a lot that are very nervous about including, gaps. And there are certain realities, and one is that gaps happen today. Years ago, about 10, 15 years ago, people were a lot more skeptical and nervous about putting them on then. But reality is that there are people that have transitioned for multiple reasons. And so you can have that information on there, but just put have a little section called other employment.
Well, I mean, but I do work full time and I go to school part time. I graduated in 14 and 16 with my associates, my bachelor's, and now I'm working on my master's. I also am working on my PMP. So I have a ton of stuff down there. And I just have this great opportunity that I'm looking to apply for right now. And I'm just so worried about leaving the Home Depot out. Because I don't want to have the gap in employment. And I certainly wasn't going to college at that time.
Right. And like I said, I mean, you can have, you can, people can present it in different ways. If you want to put it in just in your overall experience section, you can do that. Some people like to have an other employment, and literally the title is other employment. So it is, people that have worked in hospitality or are working in hospitality because, again, reality is there are people that are working two jobs. It isn't uncommon to include that in there. And there are skills, some people that are working in retail, they're depending on what you're doing. Right. I was just going to say customer service, customer service and communication, and it is, there are sometimes depending on what somebody's doing too, there's also relationship building. Because if somebody was working in a section where they're dealing with contractors or something.
Right.
But it's uncommon.
I'm sorry, I didn't think it was a bad thing to work at Home Depot. And people were because I work in customer service, that's what I do. So I was like, yeah, but it shows my assets because I'm working in customer service. It doesn't matter that I was making $9 an hour. I was still doing that, for the last decade. And so people are making me feel bad because I worked at Home Depot and that I shouldn't put it on my resume and I'm going to get judged for it.
Now, often what I've done is, and other than just putting down Home Depot, put down customer service experience. Now, Anne, what about using those generic terms? Now, I work for a global company where I'm not allowed to say if I work for a Fortune 500 company, I have to actually put on my resume, I work for a Fortune 500 company in technology because I'm not allowed to divulge the clients I work for within Psych. So I have to put that in the body of the literature. Now, when the bullet points, do you have to actually put the company or can you just put a description?
So Sally, could you elaborate a little bit? So you're not allowed to put the name of the company that you work for, or the companies that you consult with?
Right. So my example is that I can put that I work for Sykes. However, I get
Okay.
a lot of experience with the clients I work for. So in the body of the
Okay.
literature, I put I worked for a Fortune 500 company in the technology field. Now, what I'm wondering for
Yeah.
her example is in the bullet points where you're actually listing companies, is it acceptable instead of saying I work for Home Depot for her to put I work, in customer service for a retail store? Or like highlight the skill rather than the employer. Is that acceptable?
I wouldn't recommend that because they're going to ask, who is it with? In your case of not listing clients, absolutely, I can see that, not being able to do that. But, you can say that, you do consulting technology, with different organizations. I would, in Marlia's case, I would list out Home Depot as opposed to just saying retail.
And you don't think that dings me? I mean, I personally thought it was fine, and then people started making me feel insecure.
No, I don't, because it also shows that you are working. And even
Right.
if somebody wasn't working right now, pursuing their education is something that also, stands in the absence of a position. I've worked with one of our students that had a job on the trading floor, and after years and years of doing that, they said, enough is enough. I don't want to do this anymore, and they quit. That is something that happens now. And what that person is doing is they're pursuing their education. So that, having their education or pursuing their bachelor's degree is something that is also standing in the place, like the placeholder of a position.
Okay.
And
So, Marlia, I would include it.
Okay, thank you. Because I was just like, I didn't agree, but the problem was I had that feedback from multiple people, so then I felt insecure.
Well, if you want me to take I was going to say, I'm actually going to Rochester tomorrow.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I'm in Batavia tomorrow. I'm in Rochester on Wednesday, and then Canandaigua on Thursday. But if you want to shoot me an email, I can let you know if I have a little bit of an opening on Wednesday, but my schedule is pretty booked.
Okay.
But if not, you and I can set up an appointment at another time, and I can go over your resume if you'd like.
I would love that because I work right by the Henrietta College.
Okay.
I'm trying to keep you muted because my dog keeps barking.
And Lynn Ann had some questions next.
I actually was following on with the same topic, with the work gap, ageism, trying to break into a new career field, the transition, and incorporate, how much do you incorporate? I have several years of employment in multiple careers. I keep reinventing myself. But like so many others, I am starting over and very excited about that. But cognizant of what that means in terms of work gap. I also am employed, but it's not something I can put down on a resume. I can't give you references. I can't do any of that. I do private duty nursing. And
well, I mean, that is something that you can include.
I can. I just can't put an employer down.
Right, but you know, I mean, there are you know, in today's nursing field, I mean, there are a lot of people that that I've met with that have done private duty, per diem for multiple organizations.
Yep.
So you know,
It pays the bills.
right, and you know, one of the things that I try to stress with people when I meet with them, and even doing some of the presentations that I've done, is you know, today's focus for employers is really about the skills that you bring to the organization. You know, yes, if there's if somebody has industry experience, that's great, but do the best job that you can in selling the skill sets that you have.
Right.
So supervisory experience, for example, somebody can be a supervisor in different industries. Supervision and managing people is the skill set that you bring. You know, communication is the skill set that you bring. You know, and focus more on developing that content in your resume versus, you know, Eileen had mentioned working for IBM before. You know, the resumes back in the 90s, you know, there was big name recognition when you would see certain names on, you know, certain employer names on job description. I mean, I'm sorry, on your resume. And while that, you know, can still be important, you still need to focus on the skills because that's really what an employer is looking for.
So here's a loaded question. If I have an acknowledged age difference, not that I feel like I do, but other people might, a work gap, or at least since I stopped doing all of the major human resource supervisory type management, new career, new knowledge, going into a new industry. Would I be better off if I were applying for something in my new industry to do a CV versus a resume? I don't have a lot of work experience in my new industry, but I have an awful lot of experience within that industry in the form of involvement. So I'm looking at your description of the CV versus the resume. I mean, I can list what I've done and where I've worked and what I've done for those positions, skills that I've developed, and that's great. But if I look at the CV, it actually looks like it's speaking to achievements and skill sets and experience that might actually be more applicable than listing people that I worked for 10 years ago.
I would agree. You know, I think that if you are looking at positions that are either in academia, in medicine, research, you can certainly develop a CV as opposed to having the resume. You know, the difference is, and you know, if you want to develop something, you know, you and I can
see what it looks like. Yeah.
The two versions and see what might work better. But you know that you are right. You know, I mean, there are the committee work.
Not that I'm not proud of my multiple years as a practicing nurse or my years as a human resource professional, but the skills are there and they're going to be applicable to any industry.
Mm-hmm.
But my new angle, my new direction doesn't have a lot to do with what or what I've done, where I've worked. And it has a lot more to do with where I'm headed. So I think my question was supposed to be tonight, when I'm putting together a resume, do I concentrate on my education and my experiences and involvement at this level with my new industry, with my new focus, or do I concentrate on my work history? What goes at the top? What do I need to do? And I think you answered my question by saying,
So I would say what goes at the top is definitely your education and your involvement. I wouldn't not include, you could have that separate section of other employment, and not leave out the HR and nursing experience, because there's certainly advantages to including that information in there as well. But some of the other things that you've been involved in, and I'll even look at things here at the college, there are, you serve on governance, so that's a leadership experience. You are in the Student Leadership Institute, so that's something else that you include. So, I think that either would work in the path that you're choosing.
well, maybe I'll just have to design a couple and email them to you, and you can tell me what you think. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else with questions for Anne?
So the CV thing that we're talking about, I came in a half hour late, so I didn't know if there was like an attachment or a guide that you guys were talking about.
Yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to be putting the recording of this on our website, and Anne also has some slides that we will also be including, so that you'll have that resource that you can go back to.
Okay.
Yep, and actually, if you would like to, I did mention this at the beginning, but my email address is Anita, ANITA.brown@esc.edu. I will share the PowerPoint with Sally, but if anybody wanted to contact me as far as setting up a one-on-one appointment, you have my email address and we could set something up.
So I could email you like a copy of my resume and ask for a time slot for the next couple of days? This is Marlia.
Yep. Yes. Yep. I'll check with my schedule. Send me a message and I will, that way I have your contact information.
Yeah, because I have I have an open availability. I'll just take a lunch or personal or something, just to,
Okay.
I work, but my boss is in France right now, so he won't know.
Marlia, would it be possible for you to come first thing in the morning, like at 8:30?
Tomorrow, what location?
Actually, no, on Wednesday, because you said you're closest to the West Wall Road.
Well, I live in between both the colleges, because I actually went to Batavia for the college, so either one works for me. I just need to plan it. So if you say 8:30 on Wednesday, I'll be there with bells on.
Okay. Well, tomorrow I have appointments available in Batavia.
Oh, okay. What's your time frame?
I have either 12 noon or I have 2:30.
Okay. I'll look at my calendar.
Just send me an email and we could come up with
I will. Yeah, because I have because if you did 8:30 on Wednesday, that would be absolutely perfect.
Okay.
But I really would like tomorrow, because I want to apply for this job really badly, and I want to do it with the new for the new resume.
All right, think about it, send me an email,
Okay.
and we'll pick a time.
Okay, yeah, because I'm saving it now. I had made a few changes based on this conversation, and like I said, I missed the CSV part, and I don't even know what that means or what it stands for.
The CV?
Yeah. Yeah.
Curriculum vitae. So it's an extended, it's not an extended resume, it's a different version, presentation of resume information. But, we can certainly go over that.
Okay. And I'm sorry to come in late. I just had an appointment with my lawyer, and I couldn't reschedule that.
It's okay.
And did we all talk about my one question was, do we really have to have a resume on one page?
Oh, no. You don't have to have, resume doesn't have to be on just one page. But you just want to make sure that the information is relevant. For a resume, though, you never want to go over 2 pages.
Right, and it is solid 2 pages, but again, I mean, it's packed in there, and I tried to wordsmith it so that it wasn't like atrocious, but it's robust because I'm 46, like someone else is saying. I have so much experience because I've been working forever.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that 10-year work experience really comes into play too, because as we get up there, there's a lot behind us.
Yeah.
But that makes us even better.
That's right.
Hopefully.
No, not hopefully. You're looking at it from exactly, Dr. O'Connor. We just get better, like good wine.
Yes.
If you go into it thinking you are too old or no longer vibrant or whatever, then you're going to transmit that. If you can't think that way about yourself, you have to believe that you have experienced things that have added to you, to your being, to your life, and that you have so much to offer. But you've got to start on the inside and make sure that you really feel valuable. And